Hello, today we're going to talk about the difference between depression and suffering from parental narcissistic abuse and neglect. My name is Nanala Love, and my channel helps build community to help you in your recovery from parental narcissistic abuse and complex PTSD by sharing the truth about parental abuse, its long-term effects, and sharing some tools that may help you in your recovery going from post-traumatic disorder to post-traumatic growth. What I'm about to say in this video is based on my opinion. I don't know. What I'm about to say is from my vantage point, based on my personal experience and what I intuitively think is true. So I can make a point. After I share my opinion, I'm going to discuss the difference between depression or another mental health issue and suffering from the pain of parental narcissistic abuse. The CBS morning show had, I ran across on YouTube an interview they had did with the 2019 Miss USA pageant winner, Cheslie Kryst. She had tragically passed away on June the 30th of 2022, and her mother was on the show to discuss her grieving process and just how she's getting through the loss of her daughter. She had taken her own life on the 30th of June, and her stepfather was there in the interview. And this interview was fairly recent. It was just kind of how she's doing with the loss of Cheslie, and the host, the two hosts that were talking to her had known Cheslie, that loved her. She was, I've never heard of her before the news came out of her death. And she just seemed like this beautiful, gorgeous, from the inside out woman who just accomplished so much, and she was barely 30. But she had a severe depression, which confused a lot of people. She was so high energy and loving and giving, and how can somebody with that kind of energy, that had so much to give, that gave so much, like too many people, be so depressed? And it was so confusing, and a lot of people are in pain, that have worked with her, that have known her, and didn't detect that she had such a problem with depression. Because when we think about depression, we think about, not being able to get out of bed, just barely putting ourselves together, barely putting a face on, barely smiling, when we can. That's what we feel depression looks like. And I think most of the times that's what it is, because we're depressed. But I'm going to say something that might be controversial, but this is what I feel. When I was watching the more recent, and another thing I want to point out is when I saw the first time I saw her, which was the report earlier this year about her passing, and it was really sad. It affected me because the red flag for me is when they were showing clips of her and they had her voice over the clips, and she was saying that, when she mentioned this part, that she hopes one day that she can give back to the community in her life. And I'm thinking, this incredible woman before the age of 30 has accomplished more in one fourth of her accomplishments that she accomplished before the age of 30. Most people don't accomplish in their lifetime, and she's wondering if she can be able to accomplish something of value in this lifetime. Now that's a huge red flag. Like what she's saying, and the reality is so desperately different than if she's talking like that. If she ever said something like that around you when she was alive, that, to me, that should be a red flag, that something is wrong. Like, everybody is like, I can't believe, I had no idea. Well, if she said anything like that ever, that's a red flag, because she's completely opposite of not having contributed something to society. She's incredibly, I don't know how she accomplished everything she did before 30 and be gorgeous inside and out and have that kind of energy and light where she affected just in a positive way just about everybody she talked to. So that right there made me upset, honestly, and that's coming from somebody who's experienced my personal experiences. So that's where that anger came from, and that's why it touched me so deeply. But going to that video that I saw, the more recent one where, April Simpkins is talking about her struggles with grief. I'm gonna say it, she sounds like a narcissistic mother. She sounded like a bona fide narcissistic, abusive mother to me. I looked through, I did some research on YouTube to kind of see just to see her. I never heard of her before. So I YouTube other videos and interviews and things on her just to kind of get a better vibe of her. Like, am I tripping by that impression I got of her, that initial impression? But every single video I got that strong impression that she's probably a narcissistic mother. And the fact that Cheslie and her mother had such a tight relationship, it reminds me of my tight relationship that I had with my mother. My mother was not only my mother, my nurturer, my best friend, my wise counsel, but it took me decades, it took me a long time to realize that she's abusing me. But I just saw also, when I was looking at different videos of Cheslie herself, she just seemed like somebody who her authentic self was neglected. That's what it seemed like to me, and this is again coming from my personal experience. So I suspect her parents, or at least her mother that she was very, very close to, may have been too narcissistic to reflect Cheslie's inherent value and worth of her authentic self. She may have been perfect and high achieving on the outside, but was her authentic self, was the worth of her authentic self reflected in her parents, her mother, her biological father, her stepfather. So again, my opinion based on what I sense, based on my perspective, based on my experiences. So I'm saying all of this to get to the point of this video is I want to discuss the difference between depression or clinical depression or any mental health struggle and versus suffering from real world going on right now abuse, covert narcissistic abuse. We can be abused and not know it. If your parents are narcissistic and they're abusive and that abuse starts in childhood, you could be in your 30s, 40s, 50s before you discover that you're being abused. Meanwhile, you are suffering and you're maybe contributing it to depression, or what Cheslie's mother called it high functioning depression, or you may have been diagnosed with high functioning bipolar disorder or whatever. What's the one disorder they confuse a lot with complex borderline personality disorder, but could be those same symptoms, which are symptoms of your suffering currently from covert narcissistic abuse from a parent, from a mother, from a father, for whoever you have a tight relationship with. That's a narcissistic abuser. That's disordered. What's the difference? How can we tell the difference? If you suspect that you have that kind of relationship with somebody that you're close to, that you have even a biological tie to, like a parent, especially a parent, you can ask yourself some questions that may kind of clue you into if there's a problem, like a serious problem in your in your depression, your anxiety, or whatever is going on with you. Is suffering from the abuse happening right now that you don't even realize is happening, or your brain is not ready to accept it's happening because it's coming from your parent that you love so much. So one question to ask is, are they keeping you from embodying your authentic self? And are they is your value based on what pleases them? Are they keeping you from embodying your authentic self? and making your value about what pleases them. Another question you can ask is, do they allow you to be your authentic self around them? As flawed and as triumphant as you are, do they allow that? Some parents, they want you to be perfect the way they want you to be perfect, but you can't upstand them at the same time. So you kind of have to walk a fine line when you're in their presence, Also, do they tend to make your problems and concerns about them? Do they turn it around and make it about them? Do you tend to have to uplift them and their self-esteem before they can be there for you when you need them? If you're calling them because you need some moral support, you need some wise advice from a parent, from a wise older person, and you find yourself having to fill up their cup before they can give you a little bit. You need to hear something from your mother, you need to hear something from your father or whatever, but you got to fill their cup up first before they can able give you that. That could be a sign. Were you taught that you're a bad person, or were you given that impression that you're a bad person? Even if they deny it, even if they deny that they feel that you're a bad person, but if you just get that feeling where you feel that you need to walk on eggshells around them and your family so they don't think that you're a bad person. Another question to ask yourself is, when you tell them the truth that they don't want to hear, especially if it's about them or about you, do they snap? Do they rage? Do they turn into a different person where you're just scared and you just kind of go back into your shell because it's like, who is this? And another question you can ask, are you confused about a relationship? Just when you think like, dang, this is toxic, like what she said, what they did, is abusive and terrible. Just when you are convinced something is wrong, that's when they come and they say the perfect thing that you need to hear at the perfect time, and it's so comforting. It's what you need. And you go back and forth like that, and you can't tell, are they a bad person or a good person? I can't tell. What a skilled narcissist does is they're not going to be abusive all the time. They want you to stick around, so they're going to give you enough sugar so you could be around for the salt or the sour, So you could be left thinking like, are they in my corner or not? But they want to confuse you so they can keep abusing you. And I don't know if they're conscious of that or not, but they're doing it on purpose. It's a tactic. I don't know if it's an unconscious tactic or conscious tactic, but it's a tactic. I know my mother, she knew what she was doing was wrong. She admitted that she was doing wrong before I knew what she was talking about, but she still kept doing it, So the need for acceptance and love is important. There's a difference between mental illness and suffering from not getting what you need from the people that you love and say that they love you back. And that's acceptance for who you authentically are. Not what you do, not what you say, not how you make them feel, just who you are, just as you are, just because. And that's it, period. Now that is not a luxury. That's not a luxury to have that from people that we love and who say they love us back, or from family members, or especially from parents. That's not a luxury. That is a necessity for our mental and emotional health. And if you don't have that, you're suffering, possibly suffering from abuse or neglect. So you can have the symptoms of depression and anxiety, but the cure is not in a pill. The cure is not in CBT or DBT or ACT. They have their place and they're beneficial, but that's not the cure. If you are currently suffering from covert abuse, there's something happening right now, and you're hurting for a reason. It's not a chemical imbalance. It's not something that was passed down through your DNA because everybody in your family ahead of you was depressed. It could be generational behavior and trauma that results in dysfunctional behavior and covert abuse. But if you are suffering and you discover that you're suffering from covert parental narcissistic abuse, or whatever close relationship you have that's covertly abusive, and you don't realize it quite yet, you suspect, that may be the reason why you are high functioning depressed or high functioning bipolar disorder, or borderline or ADHD. You fit the description but not quite. It could be you're suffering from covert abuse, and especially if it's from a parent, because it's a whole huge load to wrap your brain around your parent doing this to you. So the problem could be that your relationship with a parent or someone very close to you is not accepting your authentic self, but instead you're having to serve them, and your authentic self is neglected and starving for attention and love. And that could be the source of your pain, the source of your depression or whatever. So, that's why you can have so many accomplishments and feel that it's not enough. It's because your authentic self is not doing it. You're doing it to please somebody else, but it's not your authentic self doing it. So you don't feel like you're doing it because your authentic self is not doing it. You are not doing it. Your authentic self is not getting the satisfaction of showing up and accomplishing that thing. So that's why you felt like you've not accomplished much, if that's how you feel. Because you're not doing it from your authentic self. You're not doing it from your real self. He or she is not doing it. So parental abuse that entails emotional abuse or neglect, and versus being physically or sexually abused, is even more difficult to detect and to heal, because first of all, it's not seen. A lot of times it's covert. Number two is we are biologically wired to trust our parents, because as we're kids, we're not hopeless, but we're helpless. We depend on our parents for everything when we're kids. It's not like we can get the car keys and just get out of here, call our friend, and hey, I'm leaving, y'all tripping. We're stuck. So our mind does this mechanism where when we're getting abused and we feel that pain, we internalize the pain because it's too much to wrap our brains around, that our parents are crazy and we're not safe. We're not going to be able to survive our childhood by feeling like our parents are unsafe. We've got to figure out how to feel like our parents are safe. So we'll sit there and internalize that pain and think it's either our fault or there's something I can do to make my parents happy. And if your parents are disordered, there's nothing you can do to make them not abuse you and make them happy if they're disordered. There's nothing. And it's not your fault. They are disordered. One thing that I am an advocate for therapy. I am here. One of the reasons why I'm here today is because of therapy. However, once I got into the phase of recovering from parental narcissistic abuse directly, and not the symptoms of parental narcissistic abuse, the depression, anxiety, and all that other kind of stuff, it's hard to find a therapist that will validate that you've been abused in that way and to treat it. Because we all come from this train of thinking that because they're parents, there's no way they can be just abusive, or they say something like, well, they did the best they can. Some don't. Some don't do the best they can, and they're just not. Like I said before, like my mom knew she said that she and my dad are crazy parents. Now, this is years ago, before I even realized what was going on, that I was being abused covertly. But she was saying it. Now that I am in recovery and I'm gone no contact with my parents, so I can have the safety to recover, and now my brain can go back and recall some things. And there are so many times where she told on herself. She's even written letters and emails to me and my siblings about her abuses that she's done to our dad and to us, but it ain't changing her behavior. She told me my childhood was worse than hers. But I've heard her story about her childhoods from 3, 4 years old on to present day. But mine was worse than her. So there's therapists that say, well, tragic, trauma, but they don't, having a traumatic childhood does not equal abuse. It doesn't just automatically equal abuse. My childhood, according to my mother, was worse than hers, but I'm not trying to abuse, I'm not, so doing the best they can for parents doing the best they can, they only did the best that's not necessarily true, not when they're disordered. And, they had a traumatic childhood. Not necessarily. Not everybody who had a traumatic childhood equals that level of narcissism where they can't help but be abusive, especially to their own kids. So there's a huge lack, I think, in therapy, that I don't know if they're not trained to deal with that ugly truth that some biological parents will just abuse their kids simply because they're an easy target. We're biologically vulnerable to need to believe that our parents are safe people, so they take advantage of that knowingly. Even if it's subconsciously, knowingly, they do it, and they keep doing it, and they're going to keep on doing it. And my mother's been in therapy, but she still keeps doing it because it's at the disordered level. I think everybody has a capacity to be narcissistic, but some are on the disordered area. And one thing I understand, when you're disordered, there's two things you lack. There's lack of empathy and insight. And those two things are broken when you're disordered end of narcissism. And there's a small percentage of people who have that disorder. And guess what? A percentage of those percentages are parents. And I don't think there's enough therapists that are trained to deal with that. And so you may run into a lot of therapists that be like, well, they did the best they can. It's like, so once again, I have to tend to them and honor them when they're not treating me well. And I'm here speaking to you in pain, but now before you even talk about my pain, I have to forgive them and honor them when they're not being honorable. Now, most parents, I believe, are doing the best they can. And we do act out of our pain, and sometimes we harm people from our pain, but once we're conscious of that, we change. Unless you're disordered, that small percentage of people who are disordered, that insight and empathy is broken. And some of those folks got kids. So that's hard. Part of the reason why it's hard to detect and heal. You could be in therapy like Cheslie was. She was in professional therapy. But these therapists aren't trained, because it's so rare to suspect or even deal with it. I had a therapist that she was great. She was there for me in tough times. I was able to email her between sessions and things like that. But once I got to that state where I was able to address the source of my lifelong pain was parental narcissistic abuse, she was like, she didn't want to deal with me anymore. She got cold. She was emotionally cold to me, and she's like, you need EMDR and I can't help you no more. And that was done. She was done. So there's a lack there, and that makes it hard to detect, because a therapist is not going to sit there and say that. It's like it's a taboo is to say that, because there's some people who blame everything on their parents, and it's not all their parents' fault. There are some that are actually disordered, and you do everything to please them, and you do everything right, and they're still going to abuse you, and they're playing on the fact that society allows them to have the parent halo, the benefit of the doubt, and they're admitting they're doing wrong, and they're still doing wrong. And there's a percentage of parents that are like that. So, and another reason why it's hard to detect is people don't like talking about it. Sweep it under the rug, like a therapist. Even a professional therapist will just I don't know what to do. They just, or if you're just talking about it with friends or just in general, because one of our greatest fears is parental abandonment, or them not approving or liking us, or them not accepting us, our own parents not accepting us. That's like a huge freaking trauma to deal with, and people don't want to talk about it. It's so ugly. I think about the story of Snow White. The original story, I think it was Little Snow White. I can't remember the title of the original story, but the original story, that was her biological mother who tried to kill her. It was a fairy tale that kind of helps adults deal with their inner demons, and it's told in fairy tale form. It was a biological mother who prayed, or I don't know if she prayed, but she wanted a daughter. The daughter came out the way she wanted, but then she was so jealous of her that she went out and she was 7 years old trying to kill her daughter. So the Snow White in the Disney version don't show that gruesome, that rough of detail, but the original story, and there's several versions of that kind of a story where the mother tries to kill the daughter because of envy out there. I mean, it's just too rough for us to look at that, but it's happening. So that makes it hard to detect and heal because people don't want to talk about it. People deny it. You go to a professional, they're denying it. Your parents did the best you can, and they don't want to hear about your struggles. And I don't think so. They don't want to hear that. So sometimes that happens. There are therapists who specialize in it, and but there's a lot. I think majority aren't, and they are really, really fast in denying it and so it makes it hard. So with all of that, how can we as adults, we survived our childhood, so how can we as adults save ourselves and recover our authentic self? How can we as adults recover our authentic self and save ourselves from abuse? How can we do that when there's so many elements against us from doing it? I will go into detail with that in my next video, part 2 of this video, so not to make this video too long. If I missed anything, key things about depression or mental health issues versus suffering the pain from covert parental narcissistic abuse, let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please click the notification button so that you're alerted when I upload my next video. And if you feel that someone else can benefit from watching this video, please share it. Thank you for watching.